Check.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering because I didn't hear anybody talking, Tim, so I'm glad everything works fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, we'll get started in just 1 second. Let me just see if I see any other panelists yet. So while we're waiting for everyone to join, we'll start in about 5 minutes. I'm curious to hear from the crowd in the chat. Anyone here interested in starting a company in the future? Anyone mulled on that idea before? What ideas do you have? Does anyone have ideas, or just generally want to start kind of something? Anyone want to pitch an idea? You can get a quick 100-person feedback. Oh, and Maria's joined us as well. Awesome. Hey, Maria.
Hey, good to be here.
So yeah, Eliza, do you want to pitch? We got Maria. She's the VC. Just kidding. Well, she is, but like, no pressure. I was just joking. Anyone want to do a no pressure pitch?
I am very friendly. Happy to have a conversation.
Colin, small scale stuff turns into big scale before you know it, even if you don't want it to. I've learned. Anyone want to do a quick pitch? Oh, Eliza, no, go ahead and say it. Sorry, I should you via text. Let's hear the idea.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah, so our idea was actually part of a competition, and my friends and I, we established Machinery Farmers Initiative, which is a revolutionary farming method based in Eldoret, Kenya. We are helping farmers to utilize their farm, like the little small land that they have, to get the most of the land that they can. So we go and through the land and see what crop is the best fit for the land, and we help them to start their farming career.
Wow, that's so interesting. That's so I would
Wow.
of all the pitches I was expecting here, that was not the one I was expecting here. Chris, Maria, in your years of innovation, I know Maria, you're more in the crypto space these days, but I'm curious if you all have a reaction to that idea.
Yeah,
Backstage.
I think that's awesome. I mean, what kinds of how do you find these farmers in the first place? Like, how do you determine who the right users are?
Well, first, my friend who is from Kenya, he actually knew the region and he knew the farmers who have. So what the way he explained it to us is that what happens is land gets divided between the number of sons in the family. So at the end of the day, you don't have much land when you have to get the most of it. So what we tried is we actually established the beekeeping as one of the first things to initiate, and we have the beekeeping, the bee farming method as one of our main methods for the farmers. Then what we did is like we start with like the sort of neighborhood, like area farmers that he knows, and then he started like pitching it to other people. Most of it like word of mouth, because of you who knows who has the social media to get the information, etc. For word of mouth is one of the best
Yeah,
ways to get it
totally.
out. So
Yeah. That's amazing. That's awesome. I mean, I love it because you guys are starting like with a very specific subsection, which is definitely something that, we always tell our portfolio companies to work on, is just be very focused on your users. So love that you're starting with kind of beekeeping and a small subset that your friend knows super well. And I mean, word of mouth is always great, right? It keeps down. I mean, another consideration we always have is kind of like how much you spend on marketing, and word of mouth definitely just means that something's working in the product and people are excited and sharing it and talking about it. So that's super awesome. Is it
Thank
something
you.
you're thinking about working on after college too?
We technically are currently working on it. As my friend is now back home in Kenya, he has like started developing it locally. He started with his family and like with the friend farmers who he knows, and they have actually started with the strawberry as well. Like bees, depending on the region, like, depending on the land, like some bees also like would like need certain climate conditions. So depending on the crop and the time, like he actually started strawberries go well, seems like it. But yeah, he has started it, and we're like remotely trying to help him as much as we can. Yeah.
That's cool. And if there's any other panelists that have joined us, maybe message in the chat and I'll kind of spotlight you. So that, I see Phaedra that you've joined us. Welcome. Really excited to chat with you. Anyone else, as they join, let me know, and I'll spotlight you. So we'll start in about 2 minutes, just to get everyone kind of trickle in. Oh, I see Karina here. Let me find you in the chat. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yep, Karina, how's it going? Just trying to add a spotlight for you. Come on, Zoom.
Okay.
When there's this many people, I think I think we're breaking Zoom a little bit. Oh, stop bouncing around.
I was just going to comment on the farming idea. I think it's amazing today because of the data that you can get from weather to doing soil samples and also trying to figure out like which two crops you can plant together. Like here in Georgia, they plant onions and peanuts together because the nutrients that they give off for each other help each other grow. And now with the internet, you can kind of get all that data so you can maximize the land that you have.
Yeah, I've done it. I've successfully. Do you all see 6 people spotlighted? 6 people in the video. If you look at speaker view, awesome. I see a few folks nodding. All right, welcome everybody. All right, this is going to be an action-packed hour, so I'm going to get started. First, I see we have videos off, which is fine. I personally don't like to have my video on in general, but for our panelists, would you all mind just showing your faces for a sec? Could you just flip on your cameras so that they can kind of see you, and you can kind of uncamera in a few minutes once we get going. But at least for the first part, I'd love for us to take a moment and just kind of see the crowd. It's kind of fun for us students to kind of flip through the screens as well. So I see screens flipping on. Thank you. Appreciate that.
This will not affect the bandwidth, will it?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think Zoom's
okay. Yeah, I usually keep video off because I'm worried about the bandwidth.
I think we're okay. But this will be just for a minute anyway, just so people can kind of momentarily see the sea of humanity here. We have 500 folks here joining us today, which is amazing. All right. I'm going to mute all. Okay, cool. So I'll switch it back to this gallery. So my name's Tim. I'm one of the co-founders of CodePath. I'm really happy to talk to you today. This is one of my most favorite topics. This panel is about paths to entrepreneurship. As one of my favorite topics, I love entrepreneurship. I started my own journey about 12 years ago. I read the 4-Hour Workweek, super cheesy book, but I was like, I immediately quit my job. I had no plan. I had no idea. I knew nothing about, I had no connections in the space. I didn't know anything about raising money. All I had was I had been saving up for 4 years, eating mostly ramen and ice cream, and living with 6 roommates. So that was it. That was the only asset. So I said, I have a year. Let's figure it out. That was 12 years ago, and here we are today. So I wanted to get a crowd. I asked in the chat earlier, but we have 566 people here. If you could just throw in the chat, who here has thought about starting a company in the future? Anyone here like cross their minds? Um, Whether it's immediately after graduation or a few years in the future down the road, I think the panelists can see that there's a lot of crowd interest in entrepreneurship here. Um, and I see an already have one. I think there's a lot of cool things about entrepreneurship. I think one thing that's cool about entrepreneurship is that there are an infinite number of paths to it. I think there's probably as many stories about it as there are. There's no set kind of route. It could mean raising money. It could also mean starting a side thing while you're working and exploring that way. It could mean bootstrapping. So my goal for this panel in the next 55 minutes is I want to, we could talk to any one of these panelists for hours, but my goal for the next hour is to see if we can demystify, unpack entrepreneurship, make it more accessible to you, and understand maybe some more of the realities of it, how you might actually get into it, and some of the learnings and challenges that faced. So we have an amazing group of 6 panelists, and we're going to talk about their kind of individual path. So I want to turn it over to them to just, let's do some quick intros. I'll do it alphabetically. I'll ask you to introduce yourselves. Karina, would you mind kicking us off here?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Karina. I'm one of the instructors for 102 as well. I took CodePath to learn iOS back when I was in Google, and I switched onto working on the iOS Google Maps team. So that was back in 2016, and then left Google 5 years into Google. So that was in beginning of 2020. And now have been on this company journey for over a year now. It's called warmly.ai. We've actually pivoted 3 times. This is our 3rd launch, which we're actually building a app for Zoom for people to get to know each other on Zoom. This little background is generated by our app, just so people are like, who am I talking to again? And then we have icebreakers and stuff like that to help engage the crowd. Happy to, if you guys have questions, even post this this panel, I'm happy to help out.
Awesome, thank you. And Chris, why don't you go next?
Yes. So about 25 years ago, I left JP Morgan Chase on the treasury side to go with a couple other people and start a small company. And we built the core for some of the smaller banks. And I was actually fortunate enough to sit through the funding of A, B, and C before we got bought. And then the company that bought us, we started talking about doing innovation there. So I've been on both sides where I've actually led innovation programs worldwide, where we've had innovation labs. And we've also had people within the organization go off and start their own company within a company. So an entrepreneurship. So my point is, you don't just have to be the entrepreneur starting your own company from the ground up. Sometimes you can also do it within a large corporation. And then my other experience would be, as part of that journey, I've been fortunate enough to be part of a venture capital fund where we've actually invested in. So I've had people invest in me, and now we kind of turn that around and we try to help others, get off the ground. And now the Federal Reserve, now we're a little bit different because of the role that we play. So my role right now is primarily focused on coming up with new innovations related to the latest technologies, DLT, AI, machine learning, quantum computing, et cetera. But at the same time, we have an outreach program to a lot of the accelerators, incubators in the state of Georgia and across the country. So we try to bring them in and give them some guidance so that they can get their companies up and running a lot quicker, so they can understand regulatory requirements and things like that. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And there's some questions going on in the chat. Everyone, feel free to throw in questions too, and maybe panelists can also answer in there. Dan, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Dan Dombe, based in San Francisco, currently founder and CEO of a company called Soundwave, which is a company that is reinventing the way we connect online using short-form audio. I went through the CodePath program, I believe, with Karina the same year, 2016. I have since, before that program, I was working mostly on backend and web. And then after CodePath, went on to doing mobile, ended up working as a senior engineer in Netflix for a while, and then a lead engineer at Pinterest before I decided to start my own company. I'm originally from the Congo, Central Africa, been in the US for about 10 years, and it's been quite the journey.
Great, thank you. And Maria, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria. I'm very excited to be here. I studied political science in college with a minor in computer science, then went to work at Microsoft as a PM there, working on search tech. And then afterwards decided to get my master's in engineering. And while I was there, I really wanted to start a company. And so that's when I really started exploring different things that I could do. And part of my exploration was actually starting a consulting company, because I wanted to do something in manufacturing and supply chains and realized I actually didn't know all that much about it. Started a consulting company to help other people with their supply chain problems. And so effectively was getting paid to learn how the whole system works. And then after graduation, started my own company. I was co-founder and CTO there. Interestingly, because I had so many customers from different countries trying to transact with each other, trying to kind of do business payments with each other. So these tended to be larger amounts of money, and then also between people who didn't know each other very well. Trust was a huge issue. Cross-border payments was a huge pain. And I started looking into crypto because of that, and just really fell in love with the space. And so after I stopped working on my company, now I work at a venture capital firm based in San Francisco. We're called Electric Capital. We invest in crypto and blockchain-based projects and businesses. And so now I'm kind of on the other side of things, where I get to work with really early stage founders and get to know them and learn about what they're building. So another really kind of exciting way to get to get involved in entrepreneurship as well.
Awesome, thank you. Phaedra, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, it's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Phaedra. I think I have a different career path than the folks here, so I'm always appreciative. I started in the labor movement. I represented working people for about 13 years, really focused on low-wage workers. From there, I spent some time in the environmental movement, and then weirdly ended up managing the musician Prince. And so I spent some time in music. After managing Prince, it was clear to me that technology had not been great for music, for working people. And so I wanted to understand how technology worked. Went to a company called Honor, where I ran revenue, and then decided that I was ready to start my own company called Promise, started in 2017. And our focus really is on how do you take away the friction from poverty. And so we work with governments to do payments, basically installment payments for government, and helping relief get out as quickly as possible. We're growing really rapidly right now because of COVID, because so many people kind of who are one paycheck away from poverty lost that paycheck. And the basic concept for us is if you can buy a Peloton on 6 months, no interest, you certainly should be able to put a parking ticket, your water bill, or anything else on installment payments.
Great, thank you. And Namrata, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hey everyone, glad to be here. I'm Namrata. I've had a very long path to entrepreneurship. I have worked in the Valley in every stage of the company. I've worked in growth stage companies, seed stage, Series A, pre-IPO, you name it. And then just recently started my own company just about 8 months ago. I started my career in the US, as a founding engineer at Microsoft for the subscription billing platform. This was again a long time back. And then the team grew from this one engineer to 300 people. Then I moved to the Bay Area, where I worked on really small startup. We got acquired by PayPal 1 year after I joined the startup. So that was my kind of first experience to a successful exit at a startup. And since then, I've worked at Facebook, leading their payments team, to crypto at Coinbase. And then most recently, I was a CTO at a company called Lambda School, where we taught computer science to adults and everyone who didn't have access to computer science. So yeah, just started my own company about 8 months ago. It's CodePath.ai, and we help small and medium e-commerce businesses to build and grow their business omni-channel and across different countries. So after 15 plus years, decided to start my own company and being in the startup space for many, many years. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so when I was in the shoes of the students, I would be thinking to myself, my gosh, especially looking at y'all's LinkedIn's, everyone's so accomplished, and how do they get such smooth paths? Which I know Dan's laughing because I know that things only look smooth from the outside. And
They sure do.
at least three of you have already mentioned pivots, and I know that things have changed a lot. Dan, I know you're already on your second pivot. You started this journey, I think, at least 2
Yes.
years ago, your first thing. And can you talk about like how you made that leap going into this space, and then the pivots that you've made?
So the whole idea of pivoting, or the apparent smoothness of my career, is just apparent, because even though I started this company, now it's called Soundwave, it was called Water about a year ago. I feel like my journey as an entrepreneur start 10 years ago when I'm still in college. The second year of college, you said you read is it
4 Hour Work Week?
Yes. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it made me forever want to change my life and become, put my life on a journey that I felt was the kind of journey that I wanted for the lifestyle that I wanted to have. So my second year of college, I was buying doorknobs on a Chinese-based website, get them shipped to the US, and then find ways to sell them to designers here. For me, it was about just kind of doing something. And that is never going to show up on my resume, how we lost all the money that we were trying to, invest in that, and how then after that, I tried something else that all kind of failed. Part of it was me trying to make some money to also pay for college, where I was in Arkansas, by the way. And then in between that and now, I've tried all kinds of things. My first attempt at entrepreneurship was starting a website called Beansprout Project, which was basically a web design workshop that was virtual. And that kind of worked out, but it's not the kind of stuff that you'll see on my resume either. What you see in the resume, of course, right now or on my LinkedIn is Soundwave, but even within that, we've had all kinds of changes. The leap was more of that I think is something that you have in yourself in terms of wanting to build something that doesn't exist because you want to solve a problem. I think that is the number one thing that pushed me to become an entrepreneurship, more than just wanting to create some kind of lifestyle for myself. And then the changes within the company are, because of another quality of an entrepreneur, which is to see how things are going, to be able to tell if the opportunity is much better elsewhere, and be able to adjust and not see that as an ego thing, but more of I want to optimize this so I can build the best whatever I'm building. So definitely not a smooth career. There's a lot of ups and downs, more downs than up very early, which gets people out of the entrepreneurship pretty early. But that's kind of been my experience with the process so far.
Thank you. And one of the first problems that the students are going to have is, gosh, what problem should I work on? Because that is, we see a lot of student ideas and student apps, and they're really centered around like the experiences of a student and the context that they are familiar with. I see that the 6 of you have worked in spaces that are very far from that experience. How does a student go about learning outside of their experience? Maria, how did you learn when you started Bambify, which was super interesting, right? Bambify, if I can do a poor pitch for it, creating an easy way for e-commerce businesses to find global manufacturers, go from an idea to production within a month, with these vetted, factories, I guess, right? How do you go about learning, what that is, and going from 0 to that?
Yeah, that was a great pitch, by the way. So I think finding an idea is kind of the beginning of the battle, but it's definitely really important to focus on the right things to work on. I think there's 2 things I would consider. One is you can be an entrepreneur without being a venture-backed business. And I think that's one thing that maybe a lot of people miss, is that there are a lot of really great business opportunities, lifestyle businesses, where if you don't, if you don't want to kind of pursue that traditional working for someone else and you want to work on your own thing, there are a lot of really great ideas there. And then I think there's another class of ideas that are kind of venture backable ideas. And that is something that, just because of the VC business model, is something that's going to be worth $1 billion, is going to IPO, is going to become kind of huge in some way. And that's honestly maybe not always the right business to start, to be completely honest. But to look for ideas, I mean, how I found Bambify as an idea was, I grew up, I immigrated to the US. My mom raised me by herself. She didn't speak English. And so import was like her business that she was able to run without being able to speak English. So growing up, I watched her run this import business. And it was very much like she would pick up the phone, she would talk to someone. She sometimes interacted with a spreadsheet. Most of the stuff was very pen and paper. And it made me realize, once the D2C direct to consumer movement was starting in 2015. So this is, think back to like Casper, Warby Parker. A lot of people were realizing that I can sell directly to people on Instagram, and I don't need to go work for Adidas or Nike to sell sports apparel, for example. When a lot of people were starting these direct to consumer businesses, I realized that people had a certain expectation for how supply chains work. We're so used to things being automated. We're used to having an app for something, but that's just honestly not the way that's just not the way manufacturing works. It's very, very low tech. And so my idea really came from, I do have this technical background. I was born in China, so obviously there's a lot of manufacturing in Asia. How can and I also kind of grew up watching my mom do some of this stuff, not exactly the same thing, but is there a way to marry some of those ideas? So that's how personally I came to the idea for Bambify. But I do think in general, if you're searching for an idea, one really great way is just to, if you are looking for kind of a venture backable idea, something that's going to be super, super big, again, not for everyone, but looking for businesses that honestly have been around for like maybe 2 decades, and everyone, has really bad reviews or feels like it's a terrible experience in some way. That is sometimes a great way to start a business with, kind of competing in where they're working on, because a lot of the times they're operating in this huge market, but they're outdated in some way. And there's something about that workflow that can be made better. Another thing is to look at, again, the giants, and to look at who they might be ignoring as a user base. A lot of the times, if you're a giant tech company, you are focused on the most lucrative user base for you, but that might mean you're ignoring actually, like a huge portion of the population, and those people have product needs as well. And so that's another way to look for ideas, is to look at, what is some big business that's operating really well, but is ignoring like a customer segment, or a customer user segment is just being underserved, and how can I go serve them better?
Yeah, awesome. And just a quick follow-up question. You mentioned venture-backed businesses. What is a venture-backed business? And how do you know whether you should start a venture-backed business?
Yeah, a venture-backed business is any business where there's venture capital coming in, and anytime there's venture capital coming in. So this is not just an angel investor. This is kind of a venture capital firm. The way that the venture business model works is they're investors that venture capitalists are also answering to, and so they're looking for, a certain return profile. And so angel investors could be your friends and family, and could be people along the way that really believe in you, that want to invest in your business and want to see you do well, and want to see your business maybe like 2x or 3x or 4x or whatever that is, and kind of grow slowly. A venture-backed business generally is looking for a different type of profile, something that's scaling really, really rapidly, something that is not just kind of, from the starting point, like growing 5x, which is already a tremendous amount of growth, by the way, but something that can be growing like 100x. So it's just a different scale of how quickly your business is growing, a different scale of the types of markets that you're targeting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's if you can eventually do it, it's a great way to learn how about entrepreneurship. If someone can kind of give you couple $100,000 to try an idea. Although
Yeah.
I love bootstrap businesses as
Yeah,
well.
I
I'm
mean,
a big fan
that
of.
is the other thing, is that once you have VCs come in, you're beholden to investors, which is positive and negative, you know.
So let me take a detour and talk about. So one way to start a business is to join one of the many accelerator programs out there. So this is just one road, is to kind of go through an accelerator. I know at least 3 of you have gone through an accelerator program. Karina, can you kick us off, because you're the queen of accelerator programs? Can you?
On to 3.
You've done 3 with this current company, I think, right?
Mhm.
Can you tell us what is an accelerator? Like, so as a new entrepreneur, and I want to get, get started. One route is to apply to one of these accelerators. What is that? What is the experience like? Can you share about that?
Yeah, I think like also for folks who like know very little about startups and like very little about venture backed or how to pitch and things like that, or how to fundraise, I think an accelerator is really helpful. In so I went through Techstars originally, then went through Y Combinator, and then also did a Sequoia program. And you probably don't need to go through all of those, just like pick one. YC is the one in Bay Area, and they've helped like companies like Airbnb and a lot of the large tech companies. And so what an accelerator program, it's kind of like going through CodePath bootcamp, but for like, how do you start a startup? How do you figure out what idea you want to do? Most of the time when you apply to an accelerator, they look for like a really good founding team. So they kind of want you to have a business idea, someone who can actually build the product, so like a CTO type person, which is great because you guys can all code. And then they kind of vet out like, okay, do you work well as a team together? Do you have like, they know that you're going to pivot your product idea. So, but they want to see that you really thought through your product idea, your business plan. You've thought through the market. How are you guys going to build like an actually money, or how can you actually generate money as well? So they ask you like, I think YC gave us like less than, I can't remember, but less than 10 minutes where it's like a speed round of questions. And so you want to practice a lot of these. They do use some repeat questions. So if you Google out there, like what does Y Combinator ask you for the interview, there's a lot of like XYC alumni who offer to help people out of like prepping your pitch. And then the actual accelerator program, if you follow the warmly.ai, if you go to warmly.ai, we actually blogged about our entire YC experience. We've like rotated through our co-founders blogging about like, okay, what did they cover each week? What did we learn from it? We compared Techstars versus YC as well. And I do think it was really helpful just to meet a lot of other companies that are at the same level trying to figure out product. And as Tim, like his first question was like, okay, the resume, LinkedIn looks amazing. Like it looks all super smooth, but there's a huge amount of just like, we actually pivoted halfway into our Techstars program. We had like 6 weeks to build something. And at the end of the accelerator, their goal is to help you fundraise, whether it's YC or Techstars. And so they try to help you prep for how do you pitch to venture capital or investors. So as Maria was saying, like venture-backed business usually raise around $1 million or so for a seed round. And that basically kicks you off to be able to have money to hire some more engineers, or if you're terrible at designing, you're like, I really need a design contractor. It just gives you a little bit of money to hire the original team. And you do want to start with a really small team as well, because you're able to move a lot faster. Yeah, generally, I would say an accelerator is really good if no one in your co-founding team has experience running a startup. If you found another co-founder who's done startups before, then you probably don't actually need to go through an accelerator program.
Yeah, and I certainly remember like all the things that you're saying about creating a business plan and all this other stuff. I remember not knowing heads or tails of what that means, and that's kind of part of the value of that accelerator program. I think they kind of challenge you and you walk you through kind of taking the seed of an idea and how do you make it marketable. You know, how do you go to market with it? What was your biggest learning from those accelerators?
One of the things I think for our CEO, he learned how to fundraise really, really well. And then for myself is just to figure out like, how do you land on a product idea? Because we actually shifted through a whole bunch of it. And at the time when we realized we needed to pivot, we actually, the program leaders was like, hey, like just go interview hundreds of people and figure out what is an actual pain point. Because they're like, you don't want to solve a small problem. Because the thing we did opposite was like, okay, we're going to build this thing that we thought was really cool and then go market it to people and try to sell that thing. But that was opposite of like, hey, figure out what is the pain point people are actually struggling with and then solve their problem instead of the other way around. And so they really emphasize like, don't solve a ventilator problem, not a like medicine pill problem. So make sure the pain point is really high that people would want to adopt it rather than something where they really had to change their user behavior to actually use our app.
And I see in the chat, and please, folks, keep on asking questions in the chat. I see someone's asking about creating a nonprofit and how that works. I was wondering, Phaedra, who, and Promise also went through YC, I believe. So can you tell us, like, how did you transition? You worked for many years as an executive director of nonprofits, then transitioning to Promise. How can you share about like nonprofits versus for-profits and then your kind of experience in YC?
Yeah, I think I really loved being in nonprofits. The issue was twofold for me about why nonprofits weren't the right place. One is scale. The scale of change is really different. And so I think an important distinction when we talk about venture is scale, right? The idea that you're going to grow really rapidly. And I think in a nonprofit, which was really amazing, it was about deep instead of depth. And so meaning like one-on-one deep, good relationships, instead of impacting 200,000 people, you impacted 50 people. And so for me, the difference between the nonprofit and for-profit was really about the ability to think about impact. The other thing was team. Like I was really interested in the kinds of people that I thought were interesting in terms of my own learning. And then I think as someone who grew up poor and working class, it was clear to me that the private sector was impacting working people and poor people in such a significant way. And absent of some interventions, it was going to be harmful. And so if you look at that, like I would see these programs that were loaning people money, right? But it was a lot of predatory lending, because sometimes what happens is in technology, if you think about it, really there's some action happening, which is happening usually already without technology. But what technology does is it puts itself in the middle of the transaction. So it says like, and it takes value from both and hopefully gives value to both. And so that looks like putting yourself in the middle of an employment relationship, putting yourself in the middle of Uber, where one person is driving and one person is getting the ride. And the technology is saying the value I offer is so important that I can extract revenue from both sides. And what I realized is I saw all these people creating companies in the private sector, and they were doing it in ways that helped them. I need a car ride after I get out of the club. I need someone to walk my dog. I need someone to do these things. And I didn't see a lot of people who'd grown up poor, who cared about poor people, creating technology that was impacting people in a positive way, because it just wasn't their experience. And so for me, I thought there was a lot of amazing, incredible people in nonprofits focused on really impacting people at a one-on-one level, but I didn't see that in technology. And I saw technology being harmful in insignificant ways, in changing the way that people went to work, from being employees to contractors, in changing the way that people looked at value. And so for me, the best way to get impacted was the private sector, because I was interested in scale, and I didn't see a lot of people who looked like I did, who cared about the things I did, thinking about those things. And so that's why we chose to be a for-profit company. I also prefer working with venture capitalists than I do nonprofit people who are donating to nonprofits, because I found that in the nonprofit world, it was very cyclical, meaning like all the donors are interested in one thing right now, and then it shifts. And oftentimes nonprofits don't get to make decisions freely based on what they want to do. And I wanted to build a company that was focused on what I thought was the best thing to do. And I thought I would get more freedom being invested in venture capital. And that's been true for me, and I feel very lucky. And so, for example, when we first started as a company, we were focused on the criminal justice system. We quickly realized that wasn't the right place for us, because we didn't like our clients in some places, sheriffs or the federal government, thinking about immigration. And so we could say, we're not interested in doing that. We want to focus more on the end user. And if I'd been a nonprofit, that would have been insane to say, like, you started this nonprofit to do something, now you're going to totally shift. And instead, our investors were great. And they just said, that's not consistent with who you are. That's not, we're clear on what we signed up for. So venture has provided much more flexibility. And so that's why for us and for me, a for-profit was much more important. I also don't think it's great to try to keep people poor. And what I found in the nonprofit is like, we were asking all these people who'd grown up poor to stay poor and like create this honor amongst it. Like, we're paying ourselves poor. We don't have great benefits. Aren't we honorable? And that kind of sucks. Like, it should be that we want to lift everyone's boats, that we don't say poor people should stay poor and we're honorable, and then rich people should stay rich and they get to be like, I was like, no, wouldn't it be great if we didn't need assistance, but we actually created wealth in our own communities? So for me, those are all the reasons why a nonprofit, though amazing, wasn't the right space and place for me and for our company's direction. I did Y Combinator, which I found interesting, mostly a comedy in the beginning, because I went and I'm not an engineer. I went to Cal State Northridge and studied political science. And everyone was like your age on this call. And they were all dudes who were like, oh, where's your product? And we had no product. I came in a minivan after dropping off my kids to school. I had on Birkenstocks. I didn't go to MIT. And so I think part of what's really important is creating a recognition that like he or she who wins is really about who's most capable and creates luck in the same moment, like where luck and opportunity meet human. So Y Combinator was really amazing for me. But the thing I always tell people is like, it's magic, right? Most companies fail by a lot. And so it's really just a question of like, do you have the perseverance? Do you get lucky? Do you get resourced? But Y Combinator ended up being amazing because it gave us focus. It also made me feel smart because I was like, oh, a lot of these people aren't going to make it. And so it took away some of the ideas of like thinking that these people were magic. And I was like, oh, I'm smarter than a lot of these people. And that created a lot of importance for myself and my co-founder.
And that's awesome that you were able to find success with Promise. One, because it has a clear social mission in addition to having the scalability of a for-profit company. So kind of cool that you found that blend. I'm sure.
I think it should not be unusual that companies help people. I think it's really insane that the expectation is that companies will be predatory, and it's different when we create products for poor people that don't screw them. And so I do think like people are, which I totally appreciate, Tim, your perspective. I know I'm just saying it, the part that's reflective is it's so sad that there's so few Black and brown people or poor people creating companies, that we think the idea of not harming people is something good, instead of the reality that we, just because we don't have folks who create technology, that we're not used to it. And so I think that's what's important about the program that you all are doing, is the more that we empower people who don't come from communities to think they deserve to create a company, the less we will think about social mission companies, because no one thinks it's a ragtag thing to create a social network to connect to your friends in college. No one thinks it's a rag. So anyway, I just want to say, I hope that what we do is help shift the paradigm, that creating companies for our own people is actually not a social mission, but it's the way that the best companies are created, solving problems that we experienced.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Phaedra, you should check out the chat. We're getting a lot of love in the chat from your words of wisdom here. And I think one of the coolest things for those 6 of you who haven't been less connected with the kind of our audience here, I would say the biggest theme that I see is everyone's not only thinking about starting companies, but like, how do I create impact? Actually, I think the notion of creating impact is probably the kind of thing I hear about the most. So that's really awesome to see that kind of example. Maybe one more thing before we leave you, Phaedra, to go to another panelist is, I'm sure it was entrepreneurship is usually a complex road. So like just for the context for everyone, one route is you apply to an accelerator, and I know Chris and Namrata, you've joined an accelerator as well. And usually it's a 3-month period, and they kind of sprint you, and you try to end the accelerator with raising money to fund the next year or 18 months or so. Then Phaedra has now gone to the next stage, which is the end of that period. You raise again, and you keep on going until you can reach kind of profitability. Um, Phaedra, what was, I guess, something that was maybe challenging, or what did you learn the most about kind of during that period?
Sure. And for context, we just raised what's called a Series A. We just raised 20 million. So it just means we basically raised money to grow a growth round to make the company grow as quickly as possible, because we have what's called product market fit, which is mean we found something where our clients really like it and people are growing. So if you had more resources, you could grow much more quickly. And that's really, I think, the essence of venture is basically you can lose a lot of money because you're trying to get as much of the market as possible. For us, I have to say the hardest thing I've done this year is homeschool my children. And so having kids at home while trying to work is the hardest thing I've done in the last 4 years. And so I'm so excited that camp just started and I cannot wait to be free at some point again. I think in the hard part about being an entrepreneur is that you have to believe in yourself in a way that is not rational. And you have to believe in magic. And so, because the world will tell you it's not possible. And what I feel really grateful for is I worked at a company called Honor where I ran revenue. I'm on the board now. And I was around all these dudes who went to Stanford who just were like, I'm the smartest, I'm the best. Of course, I'm going to succeed. And I didn't grow up like that, right? My mom was a waitress. And so trying to continually tell yourself that you are capable, that you are magic, when the world doesn't affirm that is probably the most difficult thing. And so having people around you who believe in you, in the mission. And I think for us, it's why we have to hire people who care deeply about the people we're serving, because if they understand, if we fail, people get their water shut off. If we fail, people lose their driver's license. If we fail, people go to jail, because it means, because fees and fines have such serious consequences in government, that if we don't figure out a way to do that well, there are serious harm for people. And so the growth of our company, that's what I have to root myself in, is like, I can't lose, because people will get their water shut offs. In California, as an example, beginning in September, water shutoffs are coming back. If we can't help people who owe $1.5 billion right now figure that out, it means that they're not going to have water in their houses. And so that drives me. And then the other side of that is like then feeling if you don't win, you failed people. And so I think we don't talk honestly enough about mental health. And I think it's really about protecting your mental health, believing in yourself, believing in what's true, and rooting yourself in that. And so for me, that's been really important. And also rooting myself in the people that brought me here and not the people I met here. Meaning that, like, if my mom and my sisters feel proud of me, I feel like, okay, even if an investor yells at me or, does something, I'm like, that's not how I can measure myself. I have to measure myself, by what I'm doing. When I went to our investors and we were making money as a company and I was like, we're not going to do this anymore. I was because I don't believe ethically, I want to help people grow. Like, I was like, I don't want to help the federal government detain immigrants. Like, I was like, that's the growth path. I'm not into that. I don't want to do this. I was so afraid because it's insane to say to your investors. And so I just think, but I felt like, well, I can always go back to music. I'll go back, be going to Rock Nation, which is one of our investors. I'll knock it on their door. So anyway, I think at the end of the day, it's like believing that you can do magic and figuring out how to create that if you aren't in an environment that instilled that in you.
I love what you're saying here, because I think this is such an important point for the crowd too, because I think the six of us will agree on the panel that, like, startup ideas, they want to die. They're very, very fragile things. And there's a million reasons why they can't succeed. And your job as the founder is you're sitting on the idea and you're trying to create that one path where it can live, and it takes incredible resilience and self-belief, to be able to do that, because everyone will tell you a million reasons why it's going to fail. I'm curious, Namrata, to touch on your journey with that because it was your first, even though you've been through this amazing career as an executive, as a CTO, your first job kind of nurturing an idea of your own. Can you talk about how your confidence with that and what was your experience through that? And you also went through I think, Ignite program, so I don't know if that's relevant as well.
Yeah. So Phaedra, just amazing insights. Couldn't agree more. I think just believing in yourself is the most important thing, and just going all in. The resilience is what's kind of important to build your own company. And in my personal journey, I would say the hardest part, even though I've been at many startups in various stages of the companies, the hardest thing as a founder, since this is my first company, is going through these extreme emotions of lows and highs. There are days there where I wake up where I'm feeling like top of the world, I'm going to change this world because everything is working, and then the next day everything is falling apart, right? So it's extreme highs and lows of emotions on a daily basis. So it's like in an entire week, your startup can change, you'll pivot, you'll talk to one investor, who'd say, I want to invest in your company, I want to invest in you, and then you're so excited about it, and the next day everything is falling apart. So it's just managing that stress and emotion, and you can't do that if you're not believing in yourself, to Phaedra's point, and also just having that self-confidence and resilience that I'm going to see it through, I'm going to do my best, and then surround yourself with people who can support you. Because to me, I think in these extremes, highs and lows, there are times that I want to give up, right? But I have the support system, my husband, my family, who just says, hey, you've done so well in your career and you can do anything, and just kind of getting that confidence back in you. I think that's the most important thing. So I'd say that's the hardest part. It's just going through these extreme emotions, and that happens till date. I mean, it's been 8 months since I launched the company, and every single day I wake up, with a different mindset, and that changes the trajectory of the company.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm curious to hear your perspective. I know you went through, I believe, an incubator at Georgia Tech, and I'm also curious about your kind of how you all incubate ideas within your large companies. Like, how long do you let an idea run for? What's that life cycle kind of go for? And how is it maybe different from the founding experience where you generally have to have this advocate that believes so passionately, like Namrata and Phaedra are talking about?
Yeah, so when I went through Flashpoint, I would say the accelerator, it gives you the guardrails. So the first thing they do is they say, like, do you want to trademark your name? Is there anything patentable? And they get you with lawyers. So they give you some of that support that you need early on that maybe you haven't thought of. But the biggest takeaway for me from an accelerator and incubator is learn how to listen, really pay attention to the customer discovery process. Because what happens a lot of times, especially when you first run out the door, you actually are projecting your bias on everybody you meet and you're telling them why your idea is so good. And a lot of times you miss the opportunity to listen on what they're saying on whether or not your idea is actually right, or do you need to make a pivot. So out of the accelerator, that was something that I learned. That was probably my biggest takeaway. Our first week assignment was we had to talk to 100 people. And our original idea was about traveling for consumers. And we ended up by the end of the 12 weeks making a complete pivot to working on corporate travel and a way to automate the expense reporting process. Just by listening to people, the first 2 weeks we were terrible. We came back, we talked to 200 people this week and everybody loved the idea. And then they're like, well, play the recordings. And like nobody had a chance to talk back to us. We just talked at them. So when you go through an accelerator, pay attention to that part because that's really vital and will ensure the success. The other thing that I learned going through there was that sometimes an investor will invest in the individual. They don't necessarily believe in the idea that you're presenting at that time, but there's just something about you that they like and they know that you're going to be successful. The other thing takeaway is you got to have a good support system. Like everybody has said, there's times where you just want to give up. But also you want to have a healthy dose of reality. Like maybe I do need to make the pivot. Enough people have told me that, they're not interested or they wouldn't be willing to pay or it doesn't solve a pain point for them. But now having gone through it from the corporate side, it's a little bit different. Everybody thinks, oh, you start a startup within a company, everything's good. You have the same pressure. If you fail, that company's still investing money in you like they were an investor. They could terminate you at any time. So that's another lesson. Don't think you can just go to a corporate, have an idea, and you can sit back and fail or not. They're going to continue to support you. That's just not true. And then the reason I actually came to the Fed was because I came up on the for-profit side. And our president, Dr. Raphael Bostique, is really, really big on financial inclusion. So that's why we started these office hour programs with startups and other, because we've seen the pivot. When I was going through, we used to call it the petting zoo. Investors would come through, they tap you on the head, and if they were interested or not in giving you money, you knew within 5 or 10 minutes. But now there's these social causes and everything else, and people are willing to invest in that, not just the for-profit idea of it. And as the Federal Reserve, right, our role was to make sure that the payments network is running right and the economy is running well. So we don't have the opportunity to invest. So I came there to help these other startups realize, hey, these are good things, and this is some of the things that you need to do so that you can ensure your own success. So we try to pull different companies in internally a lot of times so they can give perspectives of kind of what their journey is to figure out where we can help them. But like the biggest takeaway I said is just don't project your bias. When you have your idea to the point where people cannot not have it, and that's called authentic demand, then you know what you're developing is spot on. And you're going to have the opposite problem. You're going to tell people no because you can't keep up with the supply and those kinds of things. And those are really, really good problems. So when you go through an accelerator, the other nice thing today is like 15 years ago, big companies didn't want to work with small companies. That's completely changed. In the fintech, like big companies like FIS, Fiserv, they actually have their own accelerator programs where they bring these startups in. So now these startups don't have to knock on every door one at a time. What happens is they come into like an FIS or a Fiserv and they have 3,600 customers that they get these companies to sit down with and collaborate on what that idea is or where potential need to make the pivot. So these are all positive things that we're seeing in the industry now. And I hope it does continue because we're moving away slowly from we got to make a profit to what are the problems that we're solving that society needs us to solve. One of the things we look at is branches are closing in poor neighborhoods. Where are these people supposed to do their banking, or how do they get these subsidy checks and other things like that? So those are areas that we focus on and then take to the fintechs and say, help us figure out how to solve these issues so that we can give back to ensure the security and stability of the financial system.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad once you all enter like the world of entrepreneurship, if that's your path, you'll start to accrue these vocabulary words. And one of the most important ones is the one that Chris just mentioned, which is the customer discovery process. As a founder, you have to do hiring, which is, one of the most important things to build the team. Right up there, and if you're going to learn only a few vocab words by the end of the session, customer discovery process is probably one of the most important ones as well, which is a fancy sounding thing. It's really simple once you get down to it. It's like if you have some product and you talk to your customer and you say, why aren't you paying for this? Why aren't you buying this? And Karina talked about this as well, kind of analogizing. You want to build a ventilator product, a product that people need so urgently as they might want a ventilator. I guess, Maria, can you talk about your customer discovery process at Bamblify and what ultimately happened with that company?
Yeah, totally. I want to echo everything that everyone's been saying. I think one thing I definitely struggled with an entrepreneur is not having someone to give me like a gold star or an A+. Like no one was here to tell me I'm doing a good job. And so how was I supposed to know? And I found out really quickly that, starting for me, it was really hard to figure out the right direction for things. And so instead, I maybe I just have like a more data oriented mindset. I was like, I'm going to give myself KPIs. Like I'm going to give myself like, key metrics that I need to hit. And if I personally hit these key metrics, then I know I'm doing a good job and no one else has to, give me the thumbs up. Because everyone is always giving you advice when you're starting a company. And I think part of getting through is understanding who to listen to and who to not listen to and not kind of internalizing everything you get told. But everyone means well, right? Like not to say that people are purposefully telling you bad things. It's just everyone means well, but no one knows the customers like you do. And so, I guess speaking of customers, I definitely resonate with what everyone has said around talking to a lot of people. I talk to a lot of customers. One thing I learned really quickly is that if they're not asking, how do I pay for this? Like, how do I use this? By the end of the conversation, they don't actually need it. Like, people are going to be really, really polite and they're going to say, yeah, like I would, I would love to use this, like keep me updated. But if they're not banging the table for it, if they're not like, no, and you tell them it's not ready and they're like, that's fine, I'll use the beta version. Like, if they're not having that kind of exchange with you, then you haven't really hit upon a pain point. And I think a lot of things I really made a mistake with in the beginning was, not understanding that kind of like without that lack of enthusiasm, it actually meant people didn't need my product. The other thing is people would say like, well, I don't need it, but I think someone else, right? Like this other profile of person that I know would definitely need it. That doesn't mean anything. They're like, if you're talking to the right customer and they're saying someone else needs it, then that means you didn't build the right thing for them. And I think the other thing that I see is people try to say like, well, our product is free in the beginning. And as a way of trying to get people through the door, trying to get people to try things. Another like huge mistake that I think I made was not pricing things in the beginning. I think, having that conversation, saying upfront exactly how much you would charge for this thing and aiming to actually charge something where it makes sense for your business model. And if they're still enthusiastic about it, then that generally means that you've actually kind of created something. But in general, I think there's no shortcut. Just talking to a lot of customers, and then over time, starting to be able to parse what exactly it is that they mean when they say certain things, because everyone's going to be nice, everyone's going to be polite, and everyone's going to start giving you advice. So developing really early this kind of internal compass of who to listen to and what to listen for, and not taking things at face value, and kind of really know what you're going in looking for when you start a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's so important because the only guarantee here as y'all start companies is that you will have to evolve it. And I think
Oh yeah,
Francis is asking,
100%.
when
Yeah.
do you know when it's time to give up on an idea? And I think Maria, that's one of the most challenging things because it's your baby. And at the end of the day, they're not pulling out their credit card.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
unfortunately do not love your baby.
Yes.
And that means you got to keep on tweaking it until you either decide to let it go or you find it, like Phaedra
Yeah.
did, and then you'll be able to raise another round.
Yeah.
I'll talk. I want to touch briefly on the final topic, which some folks are asking about, which is about co-founding and finding just such a crucial decision. So I'll start with Dan. Dan, you decided to go as a solo founder, I think. How has that been, and why did you decide to go that route?
Originally, I think that was a decision that was made based on the understanding that most companies fail because co-founders or people who decide to start the company together don't get along 6 months later or a year later. And there's this saying in Silicon Valley that co-founding a company is like getting married. Because that is the person, or those are the people you will lead this company with for many, many years to come. The decision to originally start solo was that kind of, I wanted to be intentional about making sure that the company had the best chances to succeed. I would not recommend starting a company alone. Many here, I think, have started companies alone, but if you have a way to start a company with somebody that hopefully somebody you've known for a very long time, somebody that you would want to work with for many, many years to come, that is the preferred route. So I said I started as a solo founder. I actually have 2 co-founders now. I was able to convince a friend of mine that I had ran those couple of companies in college with. We reconnected, and he joined the company as a co-founder. And then a friend of mine that I met in the last 2 years here working in Silicon Valley, who now works at Workday, recently about 2 months ago, joined as a co-founder. When you are the only person driving the boat, you have all the superpowers. You can decide what the company does, but you lose the opportunity, or you don't have a way to. The best thing about co-founding is having people who can do the stuff that you cannot do better than you will ever do them. So again, having a co-founder is never a requirement for anything. We talked about YC and other accelerators. many of them not require, but recommend that you find somebody to work with you on the idea because they are aware of how hard and difficult it is. But it is not a requirement. And if you have a way to get a co-founder, get one. Somebody that you went to school with, somebody that you've worked with on a school project before, somebody that you a best friend who knows marketing while you know how to code, or somebody who cares about an issue that you also care about, and you feel like they would have that passion to drive your company forward, is people that you can have as co-founder. Last point, online now you'll find a few, I forget which one. I think is it something coffee or launch something or whatever. There's a few websites and services, including YC now, that launched something I think about 2 or 3 months ago that allows people to do co-founder dating, meaning that they are aware of people who want to start companies and don't necessarily have access to the right network or the right friends. So what they do is basically allow you to put your profile out there and other people see it and decide if you want to talk for an hour or whatever, and kind of, connect that way. There are options, but the best co-founders are people you've known for many, many, many years, or at least a couple of years, and people you would get along with.
I completely agree, especially like, not only do you have that trust relationship, but really being honest with your complementary skills too. And do you have a Venn diagram? And just for a contrasting opinion, Karina, I know that 2 of your co-founders you met a week before you moved into a house with them, I think, and decided to start a company. So you went the other direction with that. How did you know that was going to work?
I did not know that was going to work. Yeah, long. It was very serendipitous. And
Did you look for that skills intersection? You're like, oh, I don't know them, but at least they are strong in X, and so we'll
I think
be.
If I were to redo it, I'd probably vet much more. But it was mainly like very serendipitous of like, I started out with Max, who met Val at a rafting trip and was like, do you want to start a company with me? And she said yes. They were both Googlers. And then Max had worked with me before. He was the product manager when I was the lead engineer on a project on Google Maps. So I knew I worked well with him. I mainly joined because of him. The vetting that we did was like, we took a weekend to all work together because we had a 4th co-founder too. So we all came in person in San Francisco, designed and then built out a mini portion of the app that we're thinking of, just to like test out, do we work well together? The main thing that I wanted to vet was like, can we, do I trust them as people? And do I know that we can resolve conflict when we come to it, right? Because all the other things we can solve. And then we did do some like a spreadsheet of like, okay, what are our skills and what are our interests, to make sure like we kind of had areas that we can each lead and collaborate on. So I think I would have vetted a lot more and also chosen people that I worked with, because we actually ended up having quite a lot of co-founder debate, and one of our co-founders actually left just a few weeks ago. Yeah, so that would have been prevented if there was a lot more vetting beforehand. Yeah.
Thing. And maybe as a final word, Maria, can you leave us now with your hat as an investor? So if one of these students were to pitch you, because I know that you do, like a lot of investors do seed, which is very, very early, very, very nascent ideas.
Yeah.
What are you looking for now that you're on the investor side?
Yeah. So, I mean, we actually invest, often we're first check in. So we're the first check ever written to this founder. We invest very, very early. And I think when we invest, everyone on the investment team, myself included, have started a company before. So actually we kind of know a lot of the pains of what it means to start a company early on. And so, a lot of people have talked about pivoting. So when we write a check, we actually would not be shocked if the idea that we wrote a check for is actually going to evolve and change and be dramatically different by the end. So a lot of what we're looking for in the beginning is the thoughtfulness of the founder, for whatever idea they have that they're working on at the moment. How have they tried to validate it? What have they thought through? Have they modeled it out on a spreadsheet? Generally, what we say is, if it doesn't, most startups just will not work and they will fail. But if it doesn't work on a spreadsheet, if it doesn't even work when you've modeled it out, it definitely will not get off the ground. So again, like, have you done some modeling to see if the numbers work out? Have you thought about what types of users you want to target and why. Have you thought about, when you go to market with your product, what does that look like? What set of features do you start with? Like, how do you even prioritize the set of things that you build? A lot of these answers, we're just really looking for a thoughtful answer. A lot of these questions we're looking for a thoughtful answer. Knowing, again,
do you need to have a network in order to be able to send you a pitch?
No, not at all. Yeah, I mean, my email is, maria@electriccapital.com. Feel free to send me an email. My DMs are open on Twitter. I'm very, very open to talking to people who are reaching out cold.
I think that's one of the biggest kind of myths that kind of keep poor people poor, which is this notion that you have to go to Stanford or MIT or to have one of these backgrounds in order to have access venture capital. But these venture capital, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, is they want to see deals. They want to see founders pitching them.
Yeah, I mean,
taking
absolutely.
bets on folks.
I think there is something around, like, there's a style of speaking, there's a style of the way that you should put your slides together. There's like a set of like almost like social nuances that is par for the course when, for kind of like more experienced founders. But I do think those things often keep new founders or people who just don't have that kind of background out. And I think it's super exclusionary. So I'm always happy to talk to people, even if it means you're very early on. Happy to kind of chat through ideas, and happy to fill you in on vocabulary or whatever else that might be. Just because I definitely didn't come from that kind of background until, I was fortunate enough to go to Harvard, which was really great. That was like my crash course. But grew up like below the poverty line, like grew up as an immigrant. And so like very much feel this kind of like in and out dynamic. And I think for pitching to VCs specifically, there's a culture of kind of being in and like knowing what the norms are. Yeah, which is daunting and honestly probably not best practice.
Tim, I'd like to add something. I think we need to credit things like CodePath and Maria, for example, because I think the reason why YC even got created was because before YC, there was the understanding that to have access to VC and investing money, you had to know the right people. Mm-hmm. So it is a lot easier now because it's a lot more diverse, because there's a lot more VC who understand, because they've started company like you guys will start companies, and because there are companies like organizations like CodePath that decide to open up that pipeline to a lot more people, people who look like me, people who like the people in the panel here. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. Those opportunities are a lot more available now than they were 5 or 10 or even 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, Chris has been posting some great links in the chat, so go ahead and check that out. And Maria does bring up a fantastic point, which is the network doesn't matter as much, but like there is a language that you have to learn to talk about your idea. So Chris is kind of referencing that in the classes, and that is what screens people out. That is what we had to learn the hard way. We had to pitch over 100 angels before we got our first angel round. And along the way, those angels give you feedback, and you can kind of figure out, okay, this is what I'm saying wrong, and this is this is why I'm not connecting with them. So expect that process, and expect to change the way that you talk about your idea to kind of match this template that everyone's kind of used to in this space. So thank you so much for this amazing panelists. We can keep them here for hours. They have so much war experience with this. I will say my final thoughts on entrepreneurship are that, would you all agree with me? You're never ready to take that leap. You never feel prepared to take that moment. So there was just come a time where you just have to grip it and rip it and take that leap. Move to Hawaii like Karina and her co-founders, lock themselves in a house, or go to Arkansas like Dan, and just kind of start your journey there. So thank you, panelists, for taking so much of your valuable time. I know it's so busy running a company, so appreciate your time, and thank you for our audience today.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep, thanks for having us.
For having us.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Good luck.
Thank you.